OMG, Chloe, you seriously need to sit down for this. The story my friend from Korea told me this time is insane. This isn't just a horror movie, it's giving a story that will actually haunt you. No cap. It's August 1971. This young mom in her 20s is on a city bus with her 10-month-old baby. It was supposed to be just a normal day, but suddenly the bus screeches to a halt. The doors fly open and a group of men in military uniforms storm the bus, all holding guns. One of them shoves a gun to the driver's head and growls, "Drive to the Blue House. Any other route and your head will be the first to go." The entire bus just freezes in terror. Are they spies? North Korean commandos? Passengers were literally having a meltdown. The men spread out, sitting next to passengers like guards. A young soldier, he couldn't have been older than 20, sat down next to the mom. But he was different. He didn't have that killer look in his eyes. His just looked deep and sad. When the baby, who wasn't shy at all, giggled at him, he actually managed a faint smile and tried to playfully entertain her. Then the mom noticed one of his pant legs was soaked in blood. Without thinking, she pulled a clean cloth diaper from her bag and handed it to him. For your wound." The soldier looked at her with surprised eyes, then whispered, "Thank you," and tied it around his leg. In that moment of pure terror, this really weird bond formed between them. So, Chloe, who even was this guy on the bus? This soldier who looked so sad? And why was he doing something so terrifying? To get that, we have to rewind 3 years, back to the moment it all began with the sweetest lie. The story starts 3 years earlier, in a poor town called Okcheon. There was this group of 7 friends. People called them the Okcheon 7. They were broke, but they had big dreams. One wanted to be a barber, another a boxing champ, and among them was a 19-year-old named Park Ki-soo, an alias, the guy from the bus, who had this really kind look in his eyes. My friend said they'd drink cheap rice wine every night, talking about how they were going to make it big someday. Then one day, this guy, Mr. Park, shows up. Black sedan, leather jacket, Ray-Bans, straight out of a movie. He gathers the young men, takes a long drag from his cigarette, and says, "You boys look like you're too talented to be rotting away here. Are you interested in working for your country?" The deal he offered was insane. A few months of special training, a prestigious job for life guaranteed afterward, and a monthly salary of $600. Chloe, that was like more than a civil servant's annual salary back then. He'd be paying them a year's wages every single month. When they asked what the job was, Mr. Park just smiled and said, "That's a state secret." For these young men who were just so desperate, his offer was a lifeline, the sweetest lie in the world. Park Ki-soo thought of his sick, single mother. "If I do this, I can take care of my family." And so, full of hope, he and his friends followed Mr. Park, with no idea they were buying a one-way ticket to hell. And so they dreamed of a better future. They followed him. But the place they arrived wasn't a training center. It was an island surrounded by the sea. An island that wasn't on any map. It was the island of no return, Silmido. There, they learned their true mission. From this moment on, you are members of Unit 684, the Republic of Korea's most elite infiltration unit. Your objective is to infiltrate Pyongyang and take the head of Kim Il-sung. On their first day, they had to hold their own fake funerals with their photos on display. The instructor told them coldly, "As of this moment, you do not exist in this world. Forget your families, your friends, your names. You are nothing but a blade for the nation." The training was literal hell. They were forced to jump into the freezing ocean bare-chested in the middle of winter. They had to swim 2 kilometers back and forth in the sea with 20 kilograms of gear on. When a lagging trainee started to drown in the waves, Park Ki-soo tried to save him, but an instructor pointed a gun at him and screamed, "We don't save failures. Leave him." He had to watch his friend sink into the cold water. My friend said he cried silently under his blanket that night. They had to cross an 11-meter-high single rope. If they didn't make it in time, the instructors would fire live rounds at the rope. Even if a man screamed and fell, the training didn't stop. They weren't being raised as humans, they were being forged into living weapons. They were even trained to shout, "Long live leader Kim Il-sung," while stabbing dummies to pose as North Korean sympathizers if caught. Like, how messed up is that? They went through this hell for a year and a half. They became beings that surpassed human limits. And finally, the day they had been waiting for arrived. One night, the order finally came down. All units, full gear, prepare for deployment. The trainees were ecstatic. They were finally leaving this godforsaken island to complete their mission. They looked at each other and bumped fists without a word. Come back alive. They loaded explosives onto a boat and headed north into the darkness. But just as the boat was approaching the maritime border, a message came over the radio. "Mission aborted. All units return to Silmido immediately." Chloe, can you imagine their devastation? Just because the international political climate had changed, their 3 years of hell were just thrown in the trash. The nation's sharpest blades were now just a liability left to rust. And so, as time passed without hope, one night, the inevitable finally happened. The tragedy began with something so small, a single bottle of soju. One of the trainees had secretly stashed it. That night, they gathered in the barracks and passed the bottle around, each taking a sip. It was the first alcohol they'd tasted in 3 years. It wasn't just booze, it was the taste of the world they had lost. But they got caught. "You sons of bitches have gone soft," the training commander screamed. Curses and beatings followed. But the look in the trainees' eyes that night was different. It wasn't fear anymore. That single drop of soju had broken the dam of 3 years of pent-up rage. At dawn on August 23rd, 1971, they moved without a sound. The crashing waves masked their footsteps. They had 3 targets: the armory, the communications room, and the guards' barracks. Park Ki-soo's team took the comms room. When they kicked the door in, the comms officer inside was stunned, reaching for his pistol. But before he could even draw, Park Ki-soo was on him, disarming him with a move the officer himself had taught him. The officer's eyes were wide with disbelief and fear. He was face to face with the monster he had created. You animals," he choked out. Park just stared at him with dead eyes and gagged him. It was the same everywhere else. The elite guards were no match for the monsters they had trained. The trainees used the very tactics they'd been taught, but better, faster. After a brutal 20-minute battle, it was over. Out of 23 guards, 12 were shot dead, and 6 drowned trying to escape. One trainee also died in the process. The island was filled with the smell of blood and gunpowder. And now the story returns to the present, to the moments right before they hijacked that bus, having just escaped from hell. The 22 surviving Osori moved towards the coast under the cover of darkness, but a soldier at a coastal guard post had already spotted them and reported it. They hijacked a city bus, threatening the driver with a gun, and they shouted, "To the Blue House!" But they didn't get far. Police cars, alerted by the report, blocked their path. "Stop!" the police yelled. The answer was a volley of gunfire from the bus. The trainees, without hesitation, fired with precision at the cops trying to stop them. A police jeep swerved into a ditch, and the bus of blood and rage sped on. The road turned into a war zone. Army trucks joined the chase, and a firefight erupted. Glass from the bus windows shattered everywhere. But the trainees, using their training, leaned out the windows and returned fire, breaking through the Army's blockade. Then, a military sniper shot out the bus's tires. As the bus screeched to a halt, the trainees poured out, firing into the air to stop traffic. They stormed another city bus, taking new passengers hostage, and their final, desperate race began. Finally, the bus was stopped by a final barricade in Daebongdong, Seoul. It was completely surrounded. Bullets rained down on them from all sides. The inside of the bus was a chaotic scene of screams and moans. Realizing there was no way out, their leader made the decision. "This is the end," he said. Then he turned to the passengers and yelled, "Everyone, get off, now! Our fight is not with you!" As the passengers scrambled off the bus in a panic, the trainees looked at each other, calmly preparing for the end. As the young mother was getting off, clinging to her baby, Park Ki-soo, the soldier from her side, pressed the blood-soaked note into her hand. "This, please send a letter to my mother." And then he pushed her back. "Go, you have to live." The moment the last hostage was clear, the leader's final command echoed inside the bus. "All units, pull the pins!" A moment later, the bus was engulfed in a massive flash and a deafening roar. And just like that, it was over. But Chloe, the cruelest part of this tragedy was yet to come. A shootout in the middle of Seoul. The whole country was in an uproar. The government's first announcement was that they had subdued North Korean commandos, but they quickly changed their story to a riot of special criminals with grievances. The existence of Solmido and the infiltration unit was completely covered up under the guise of state secrecy. The 4 trainees who survived the blast, the military promised them they'd be sent to Vietnam if they kept quiet. They believed the lie and cooperated with the investigation, but it was a promise that was never meant to be kept. They were sent to a secret military trial, and all 4 were sentenced to death. 70 days later, the executions were swiftly carried out. Their families didn't know what had happened to their sons, their brothers, their fathers for 35 years. It wasn't until 2006 that the Ministry of Defense officially released the list of the Solmido unit members. Only then did the families learn the truth, that their loved ones had been turned into living weapons for the state, then abandoned, and finally died with the false label of criminals. Chloe, isn't that just so tragic? Park Ki-soo, the 19-year-old who died after ensuring a child's survival on a bus, and the other 30 young men, their remains have still not been returned to their families. They were given names by the state when it needed them, and had their names erased by the state when they were no longer useful. It's such a painful, sad story of Korea.